Welcome to Watching the Throne, a lyrical analysis of Kanye West. My name's Chris Lambert, and I am joined today for a story by the one, the only, the world-famous Tony Williams. Tony, thank you for being here today.
I am he. You're welcome. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, how would you...
I'm a fan of your podcast, by the way.
What? Thank you.
I really am.
How would you intro yourself to people? How would you want people to know about you? Like Tony Williams, the singer, Tony Williams, the artist.
Yeah, Renaissance man, but artistic. The artist, I think, is a good word by definition. It's a craft. I'm a guy that appreciates on many levels of taking something from inception and forming it into manifestation, if you will, in the physical realm. Music just happens to be one of those mediums or one of those things. So yeah, definitely the artist. Yeah, I think it's really something to conceive something in the mind and create it, whether it be physical or sonically or
Because I mean, it's one thing to have the idea; it's another thing to actually then do and create. That's right. The whole other level.
Yeah.
Also, speaking of which, you have your next wave of music that's coming out, about to come out.
Yeah.
What's the project called?
It's actually probably my fifth studio project, but my second mainstream album, not to be confused with mixtapes.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's a continuation. It's the world famous Tony Williams, To Gain the World, King or the Fool in Opera, Volume 2. I love long ass titles.
Yo, it has all the... Yeah, that's a long ass title, but it's got the connectivity to the first one. So you got to include the connectivity to the first one. Is it going to be following still Tony King, or is it going to be?
It is. It's the continuation of the saga of Tony King. Yeah.
The long-awaited return of Tony King.
Yep. He was exiled. He self-imposed exile, and he's back in Volume 2.
Good.
He's been away for 5 years, and he's back on the scene.
Ready to make a splash.
Better and improved. Yeah.
What are you most excited about with To Gain the World?
Yeah, I'm super excited. Number one, because it's a culmination, if you will, of this evolution. From the beginning, I've coined a phrase when talking about my new sound, and that is, my new sound is my old sound. And what I mean by that is, I worked years to come up with the sound that led to me being positioned to contribute to projects like starting with College Dropout, and spanning across, the last 15 years where I've worked with countless, the hierarchy, I like to call it, of hip hop. But then when it came to my own music, producing and delivering a sound that fan base that I had built as a result of that body of work, delivering what they had come to expect of the world famous Tony Williams. And, but at the same time, all this time having a desire to present the music that got me to that point in the first place, which was, this sound is very reminiscent of this classic soul singer. Yeah. And so I think it's come full circle. And so, and I think most artists after that are blessed or fortunate to have that type of longevity in music, make this evolution of coming back to where they started, and making the music that comes from here, that they, are not meeting a certain criteria or,
It's like you kind of start with your core and then you journey outward as you kind of try new things, discover new things, but then eventually
you try to meet waves. What currently is going to pay the bills, which is not necessarily who you are at your core.
Yeah.
And so I think that the magic or the cool thing about this album is because I feel like I meet both objectives with this album. Because it is who I am. It is, it's the original Tony Williams before he was the world famous Tony Williams. But he was just Tony. Tony from 52nd Street.
Yeah.
But it's him. But with everything, with all the rocks that I've gathered as the stone was rolled, everything I picked up along the way through all of these, the last 15 years, it's that, it's the whole journey.
Yeah.
So it's a full culmination coming full circle. So that's what's dope about it.
I just an aside, I got to hear some of the tracks and they are amazing. Like, I'm so excited just to be able to go back through and listen to them all over again. But they're just very dynamic. Like, you did work on this album, and it shows.
Yeah, and that's that's another thing I'm proud of. Of course, I've been around long enough that my being doesn't quite vibrate at the same rate of the rest of the world or society, or even more specifically the music world.
Right.
And we talked about it earlier, there was a time when it was commonplace for 2 years to go by before you got an album from your favorite artist, whether it be a Michael Jackson album, a Prince album, an Earth, Wind and Fire album. There was 2 and 3 years between those albums sometimes.
Yeah.
And so, that artist really, those songs are marinating and being honed and perfected. And it's just like real craftsmanship going into it. And so, and I'm fortunate, and I think that's something that I'm able to bring to music. And I'm sure that I think that I'm one of the few artists that, has the platform that he can, and being an independent artist that I can, do it within my own terms and time limitations and things of that nature. But yeah, there's a lot of work that went into it, a lot of time. Yeah.
And it's such a detailed project. Like,
Very
each song
detailed.
has all these, like, little...
music used to be like that.
No, not so much. It's like you throw on the beat, you have some line, like, cool. But it used to, man, it's gonna do well. Well, you talked about like artistry, being an artist. When you were a kid, like back in the day, Oklahoma City, did you know art was gonna be your thing, or did you kind of work your way towards music?
Yeah, very good question. No, I didn't know. Definitely came from a musical environment. My 4th grade teacher told me that I'd be a writer.
Really?
Yeah, she did. As a matter of fact, what was it? It's been the last 3 or 4 years that she passed. And I remember when they had a memorial for her at the school, she had a lot of the writings and materials from her previous classes over the last many, many years. And she had in a binder these books that we made as a class where each student would take and write a certain amount of pages and I even saw the books where I had, even the illustrations, where I was actually doing the illustrations for the book and the storyline. But she told me, she said, you'll be a writer one day. And it stuck with me. I didn't know what form. And actually, when I first got into college, I was in a journalism school. So I was definitely headed in that direction, but I never knew it would be in music.
Yeah.
But I was always around. There was a lot of creatives in the family, from stage productions. I had an aunt that directed choirs and would do actual local musical productions and things of that nature. So I was raised with that type of energy, just around creatives. So I always knew that I was at home being creative.
Yeah.
And whenever it was more academic or more, I never, even as a young adult, I never thrived in an office space. I just always just never seemed to work out.
Yeah.
So I was just always at home, doing something artistic. And I do lots of artistic stuff, everything from drawing and painting. I make jewelry, and I'm just, I'm always doing something with my hands. And it's building something. I built a doghouse not long ago. And I just love doing stuff with my hands. My dad, my grandfather, our family business was my granddad had a furniture upholstery and refinishing business in Oklahoma City. That's what I grew up. That was the family business. And so I grew up in an upholstery shop and a refinishing shop, and there was, he used to give me and my cousins, $1 to, and give us a sheet of sandpaper and a table to prep, and so here I am, an 8-year-old sanding a table, and even today, I actually repurpose furniture, so I've just always done stuff with my hands or with my, and music is just another way that thing manifests, so it's just always something creative. But no, to answer your question, no, I never thought I would thrive in the music industry. It never was on the radar.
Were you singing as a kid? Like, when did you start? Okay.
I was, but not very well.
Yeah.
Very funny, but because actually was one of my, first of all, a bunch of us cousins. I have no siblings.
Mm-hmm. Only children.
Yeah, there was a couple of within our cousins are the tree under my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, and then us cousins. So a couple of us only children, myself being one. The other was another guy by the name of Kanye West. We're both the only children.
Yeah.
But of all of the cousins, they're most of the cousins much better singers than myself. And that other guy I spoke of, Kanye West, was the guy that couldn't sing at all. We never thought he would do anything musical. There was always me. What was the question you asked?
Were you singing when you were a kid?
Yeah. But because both of my parents, my mom was actually a pianist at church. My grandmother was the secretary of the choir at her church, and so
you didn't really have a choice.
There was always pianos and music in anybody's house. My grandmother's, my aunt's, my own house. There was always a piano and an organ. In any house you went in, there was always singing around the holidays. But like I said, all the other kids, in fact, they would joke about the way I sang, and so it was a big joke as a kid. Like it was always finger pointing when I would sing. But look at me now.
That's another example that it's not just like, born with talent.
No, I worked on it. I worked on it. And the reason why I worked on it is because I thought that I was really, it's kind of like Kanye with making beats. Because he started making beats because he needed something to rap to.
Yeah.
Because he saw himself first and foremost as a rapper.
Yeah, and he's like, I don't want their beat.
So let me figure out how to make my own beats because I'm gonna show him I'm a rapper. I'm not a producer. I'm a rapper. And so I figured that I think my first mindset was that I thought I could I could craft songs so well. And it's kind of how I kind of backdoored into singing. It's like because I thought I kind of write it. Who else was going to sing the songs?
Right, it's me or going around being like, "Will you please sing this?" Will you please sing this?
Yeah. But I just really felt this thing. I was like, man, I think even this. And it was funny when I first started. And there's a story to when I first got my first call to be in the first band, the first band that I was ever in. But but the thing was, I kind of learned the craftsmanship of songwriting just by myself, and it was almost like a designer or a dressmaker. Like you take a dress and you actually destruct it to figure out how to construct it. So you make a pattern. You basically take a dress apart. You got a pattern. So just kind of mentally, it's like I would listen to songs and like deconstruct them. It's like, oh, this part works for this. Oh, this is how you make a sleeve, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of, in my mind, just kind of destructed songs and understood the anatomy and began to learn how to craft songs. And, I thought that I could be so good at it. It's like, okay. And then I kind of thought that they were so unique and different that who more would be more fitting than to sing them than me? Who else can pull this off?
The plight of the only child, constantly thinking, who else can do this?
Narcissist.
Was that
me and my cousin have been accused of that before, I guess.
was that a high school period? Was that post high school?
Was that post high school?
Okay.
However, and I hadn't thought about this. That made me think of being, because I was handed my first instrument as an 8-year-old, because both of my parents grew up with played in high school bands playing saxophone. Okay. So when I was 8 years old, they handed me a saxophone, and I can remember actually being about like 12, not even 12, maybe 10, 9, 10. And getting the kids on the block that, one of the guys around the corner, his parents got him a guitar, and another kid had a trombone, and another kid had a drum. And I cannot remember being a 9-year-old in my bedroom with like 7 guys with instruments making noise. And that probably was like the genesis of it all. But yeah, that was actually college.
Okay.
When I first, got in my first band, I was like college age. Yeah.
Were you nervous during the first performance, or did you have that like only child like, no, I'm ready for the stage, I was born for the stage?
It's funny you say that, because it was another guy, because even at my greenest point starting out with bands, there were people that we interfaced with that were far more experienced, and my guy that actually sang in the band was actually marveled at the gumption that that I always had to really want to be competitive with far more seasoned musicians, and always thinking that I could stand on the same ground with experience, with musicians far more seasoned and experienced than the experience that I had. So I guess I always had gumption that I was much better than I probably actually was. Something I always had. Yeah, back to that narcissism, I guess.
Yeah. Did you have any kind of? It just makes me think of like the competition from like a sports background. Did you were you playing sports?
Yes, definitely grew up playing all sports. As a small child, playing the basic in that time, well, basically, we were only exposed to the baseball, basketball, and football.
Yeah.
And especially in my era, I probably played many years. Had a basketball in my hand every day of my life for many years. But actually in high school I played basketball and golf varsity, junior varsity basketball, but in varsity golf actually. Still love outdoor activity. I ski a lot. I play a lot of golf. My body doesn't really withstand the rigors of basketball. Actually, back when we were recording the Twisted Fantasy album, we recorded it. We all famous for picking destination recording spots. We were in Hawaii at that time, and the first week of the recording, so our routine would be to get up every morning and start the day off at the YMCA playing basketball. I blew my Achilles out first week of Twisted Fantasy. So the whole album. The whole process of Twisted Fantasy, I was spinning a cast.
Were you still expected to wear the suit? Like, wasn't there the rule about wearing like suits to the studio?
That was a different time. That was Rosewood. That was prior to.
Okay.
That was before. That was before Twisted Fantasy. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We had a much more relaxed environment by that time. Yeah.
Okay. It's just like, do you have to have the cast that goes well with the suit?
With the suit, yeah. Kind of slit the leg so it can fit over the cast.
Right. Innovating. Okay. And you were saying earlier, you still run.
I do. I'm a marathoner. I've actually it's been a couple of years. I ran New York.
It's crazy.
And it is crazy, but the touring schedule and the work schedule, because marathon training is so specific. The training is, and I can never stay. It's always interrupted by recording or going on the road or something. So I don't get to run them as often as possible. But it's always been one of my things, especially as we do destination sites. For example, last summer we did the Wyoming sessions.
Yeah.
And Jackson Hole there is the largest. They have the National Elk Refuge in Jackson Hole, and so I would go down and I would run 8 miles through the elk refuge every day, and it's been such a blessing. Especially love I live to run, and fortunately I've seen the world through the eyes of a runner. It was always the joke on tours. We'd be somewhere, Tokyo or anywhere, and I'd get up before anybody else got up. I'd get up and go do a 6 mile, 8 mile, 10 mile run. And by the time we got out and about as a group, we'd be several miles away from the hotel and passing things like, yeah, I saw this morning. Like, how'd you see it? I saw it running. So literally I've seen and experienced probably most of the universe, most of the world running. Yeah, so I live to run. I love it.
It's cool because you pick up details. It's not just that you're in the place for the show.
Because you know what? I just said a few minutes ago that I ran New York, and to see New York from the marathon is the best tour that you can ever imagine to see New York, because you run through all, 5 boroughs, 4 boroughs? How many boroughs is it? Five? Whatever. Yeah. You run through all of them. And so, it's the craziest tour of New York City is that marathon run. I had never seen it from that perspective. It's crazy. And to go back, and even the streets that you were familiar with, you never saw it from actually being on the pavement.
Right.
You're maybe walking on the sidewalk, and so you see the city so much differently running the streets of New York City. It's amazing.
Do you feel running helps when you're in the creative aspects too, just helping to clear your mind or get you
Late Registration, I can remember there was a couple of songs. In fact, I think it was We Major. There was ideas that, because I like to take the session outside of the session, and I would always load it up on my iPod and put it in my ears on my run. And just those things that those puzzles in the song that you can't unlock. I can remember standing on the corner of La Cienega and Sunset with the We Major track, and it just clicking, standing waiting on the light to turn green so I could run across the street, and just the magical part of those melodies just clicking, and I can I love working on music and loading the track up and running with it and letting those ideas go around. I've uncracked many a song mystery on a long run. Yeah,
because there's something about the studio. You're able to do work, but there's something with the little puzzles that you need to kind of get away.
You gotta get away.
It's like going from the sidewalk to the street. Just that little difference in perspective makes you see something in a completely different way.
Yeah, that's happened many times.
Okay, so how long were you in Oklahoma City after? Did you go college in Oklahoma?
I did. I went to OU.
Okay.
I did.
So that was still a lot of your life leading up to that period was still Oklahoma focused.
Yeah. I left OU after my second year. I just got bored, and I told my mom, I'm done with school. I don't know if I'm cut out for this. I don't see my future. And so the summer after my sophomore year, I packed up my car, and my mom jumped in with me. and I drove to LA, and she escorted me out there, and she dropped me off at my aunt's house, and actually that's where my music career started at that point. But and I actually enrolled in school once I got there. My parents were kind of like, well, you can go to LA, but you're gonna do something. And I actually got into, like I said, I had been in the journalism school when I was at Oklahoma, but I started going to school at FIDM, the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising, because I've always had a thing for fashion. Yeah. And it was a time where, like I said, I always preface conversations by establishing a timeline pre-internet and post-internet. And pre-internet, post-internet's all kind of career opportunities have opened up, with technology and
podcasting.
We didn't have that option. And it's funny because I was so much into sports. I wanted to be a sports broadcaster. That's why I was in a journalist. I was in radio, TV, film. Yeah. And I wanted to be a sportscaster. And when I thought about that, and that was a time where This was like the beginning of ESPN. So for the most part, TV was ABC, CBS, NBC. So I figured there's 3 jobs in sportscasting. There ain't no future in this. You know, it's a different world pre. Maybe I better try this singing thing out. This ain't gonna work. So that's when I moved to LA. I started going to fashion school.
Okay.
And while I was in fashion school, that's when I got my first call to come join a band, and that's where the rest is kind of history.
Yeah. And then it kind of took off and took a lot of your...
And those things led from me going from one band to another and honing my craft as a songwriter performer. And that's when I caught the eye of my cousin Kanye, where he was actually a fan of what I was doing. You know, like I was saying, he was starting to learn and being mentored by people like No ID and things. But to that point, his resources were crate digging and finding and chopping old soul samples, sped up soul samples. But he became a fan of me as a song crafter and kind of was very compelled and intrigued by the ability or opportunity to work with a song crafter and kind of expand his arsenal or repertoire as a producer, where he could expand from having something more than just a record at his disposal as a resource to make a song.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, he was a fan first. And so it was like pre-college dropout, probably 2002, where we had that moment where we went in the studio together. And like I said, my experience was coming from a place where we took 7 or 8 musicians and went into a live room in a studio, plugged up, pressed record at one time and made a recording.
Yeah.
Where his experience was one guy that created every sonic of the record. Yeah. So you're talking about 2 different worlds that collided together that day. And I think musically, neither of us were the same after that day. And that was like probably 2002, 2003.
Yeah. Was there some like growing pains or confusion in kind of meshing those styles, where he's doing it one way, you're like, well, what about this? Or was it just kind of positive learning?
It was definitely positive learning. Definitely, it changed from that day on. My methodology, if you will, of how I approach creating music changed from that day.
Yeah.
And I think it influenced him the same amount. He made a statement that was very, one of the biggest compliments is, for me, it's been many years ago, it's probably been 7, 8 years ago, but he told me, we were riding in the car one day, and he said, I listen to much cooler music these days as a result of having been around you. And I always think that, a very good song or example, and he never said that, but I could hear a song that comes to mind was like Only One, the song that had Rihanna and Paul McCartney on it. I feel like that song is like a direct influence of him being around myself all those years. It's like that's Tony Williams' influence, so yeah, it's real dope. I think it's dope to be able to hear my influence on him. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, he introduced me just recently, a few days ago. He's like, that's who I learned how to write songs from. It's my cousin. He taught me how to write songs. I think it's really cool. Yeah.
What did you know when you were kind of high school age, college age, and Kanye was younger doing his thing, did you know that you two would maybe collide one day on music, or was that still kind of...
No. Like I said, there was a 2-year period that I didn't listen to music.
Yeah.
Because of a band breakup. And that was between 90 and 92. And so what I missed during that period was like Tupac, Biggie, the Fugees. Like, I had to catch up on that stuff like that. And then even, and during that time leading up to him even like getting placements, like working on the Jermaine Dupri record that I think was one of his first placements, even up to the point where he had done H to the Izzo. And people don't, you have to realize, because I'm 14 years older than him, and coming from there was a very stark demarcation in music that took place, going from R&B to what R&B is known today. it was a very hard line of demarcation.
Yeah, which can divide a lot of...
It's a very hard division. And so when he had done H to the... And because I come from the other side of the line, and he kind of drugged me over the line.
Yeah.
But before I could be drugged over, like I said, going back to H to the Izzo, when he did H to the Izzo, I had no idea who Jay-Z was. And people were saying, and literally I'd be in conversations where people would be talking about this rap thing, and I knew what rap was because, of course, I remember Rapper's Delight. As a matter of fact, my favorite rap group, and to this day, is probably one. I don't know if there's another rap album that I've ever purchased, but it was Houdini, Back in Black. Oh, and they were such my group that I named, there was 2 guys in the group, Jalil and Ecstasy, and I named my son after one of the guys in the group. So my son Jalil was actually named after Jalil in the group Houdini, because they were like my favorite, only rap album that I ever purchased. And so that's what my son got his name from. What are we talking about?
Just really.
Did we know? Did we think we'd ever work together? Yeah. So there was that big line, and so there was things as he was gaining his foothold in the game, and me just being oblivious to anything even hip hop related.
Yeah.
It was, I had no idea.
Yeah.
And so which led to, and then a year or 2 after that, when he got his deal, and finally he's working on College Dropout.
Yeah.
And it was at that point because I was very influential. I remember his mom, because we spent all of our holidays together. He and his mom would come to Oklahoma, and spend Thanksgivings and Christmas, and that's when we spent our time together. And I can remember when he was first getting introduced to music, and his mom what kind of equipment should I buy him? And I remember those first conversations, and I remember him taking him to one of his first experiences actually in a studio. So a producer in Oklahoma City. Matter of fact, I was just recently with him. There was a group called Color Me Bad, out of my hometown, Oklahoma City. And I actually wrote their demos that they got their deal with Giant with. So when they were trying to record demos to go get a record deal, they would come to my house, and I was like, I got a song you guys can record. And I'd give them songs, and they'd record, and they would shop their demos. Yeah. So I was writing their demos. And there was a producer, as a matter of fact, that wrote the song I Adore Me More, and a couple other songs on the album named Hamza Lee. And Hamza and I at that time, were kind of a production team. We would work on producing for local guys in Oklahoma City. Yeah. And one holiday when Ye was in town, he was young, very young, and I would take him to the studio and, just let him just kind of vibe in the studio, push the buttons, and that was one of the first studio experiences he had. But... and
he hated it, right?
Exactly.
Exactly. Turned away from music.
Yeah, and so,
that's cool, man. Okay, so then you flash forward all these years later. Does it still feel as fresh? Does it still feel like the same kind of energy that you guys had back then working on Dropout, or does it feel different in all kinds of ways?
Process wise, definitely our process has definitely evolved. Much different process. The early process, and it's still a great time now, but it was the early College Dropout, late registration. Those processes were, oh my God. Because we were so young. Even we were figuring it out.
Yeah.
And I think, man, I can remember a situation. It's a testament in that uniqueness in creativity is going to always reign supreme, because there were a lot of things, because we were so young, that were done from a craftsmanship standpoint that were very non-conventional.
Yeah.
Let me just go on and say it. They were wrong.
Yeah, right. Like, you don't do that.
You don't, exactly.
Yeah.
But the uniqueness of it and the genius of just being uniquely different and uniquely what comes from here. And that's what the early studio sessions were. Mm. It was like, man, this is what I feel. This is what we're going with. And I can remember there was we were working on a certain song, and without getting into the detail of it, and I was like, you know that this should be like this, and Kanye just saying, well, it's just a, what did he say? He's saying, man, it's just I don't remember the adjective he used to describe it. It's basically saying it's just a rap song. In other words, like all the rules out the window, because I'm very, academic about the rules and things. But, one of the things that I want to leave in music is just, and one of the things that he, and I think was very prominent in the early recordings was just giving people permission, to take the liberty to do them. Yeah. And I think we're losing that in music. And that's, musically, what I like to put into music, there were songs that I can remember, very specific songs, in the olden days, when we were listening to albums. I would love, albums used to come out on Tuesday. And I can remember, you'd always set aside X amount of dollars for a Tuesday to go get those 6 new releases that, about 6 albums on a Tuesday. And just laying them out on the floor on the shag carpet, and reading the album liner notes. Man, that was so everything. But there were always those what we call album cuts for me that made albums. I have this philosophy that an album is only as strong as its weakest album cut. And so I always loved those albums that you could put on, drop the needle on song 1, and you played it all the way through without skipping a song. And there were so many albums in that time. And I think we've become such a singles-driven society, a market. It's like every song is just like this attempt to like hit a home run every song. Right. And you miss those songs that mean so much, that were just a great song. Because I think when you have the intent to make a hit song, it's so hit or miss. And I think a lot of times we elevate songs to hits that were actually misses.
Just turning on the radio. Yeah. And so there was so many misses that we embrace as hits. But there were those B songs. But I prefaced that to say there were those songs that were those albums, those songs or B-sides on the 45, if you will, were the songs that really influenced me a lot. And there were a lot of those songs that as I started as a young songwriter, I could go back to the magic that I felt in those records and how they made me feel. And I could take the essence or the feeling and reproduce not the song, but the feeling and the essence of the song. And the thought process that went into it was, here I am, the songwriter in today's era, but the connection or the influence that this person doesn't even know that they've influenced me to this level that I am now putting music out into the universe, where I am not taking their song, but I'm taking their soul. Yeah. And wanting to give that to whoever this person is that's out here that's listening to the music that I'm doing. So there's lots of albums, even the music that I play, that we listen to. Procrastination is one of those songs in particular. Procrastination was supposed to be on my last album, and I just hadn't developed it to the area. It still needed a lot of work, so I held it back. But I think for me, that song was kind of on the fence for a while because it's very non-traditional, I think, as it pertains to a pop format. But the soul of that record reminds me of one of those a particular B song that was very influential in my teen years from one of my favorite bands. That song makes me feel like a certain song used to make me feel. And so I felt like this song had to be on the album because I think
that although it may never be a radio single, some up and coming artist / producer is going to hear this and it's going to inspire them.
Yeah.
And so there is purpose front loaded into that song being on the album, is that it may inspire somebody to be uniquely different in a certain way, but they will take the song in all of its uniqueness and use it creatively to beget that next thing that goes out into the universe musically.
And that's just kind of building that link, that canon of just influence and inspiration. It's not just always like, oh, this is the radio hit, this was the popular one. It's the one that has that other feeling to it. That
speaks to you, and it gives you, it broadens you, it lends that thing to your arsenal that you would not have gotten anywhere else. Yeah. You can only regurgitate or manifest what you ingest. And I think a lot, especially with music becoming our sound becoming so homogenized, I think a lot of young artists just don't have a wide enough breadth of musical experience to create anything else. And that's what it becomes. And so I love developing young artists. So one of the things that I'll do if I take a young artist, I typically love to see what their library of sound looks like. And it's usually very homogenized, very focused, very one-dimensional, and being able to, well, what if I take this from you? Because one thing about R&B music, that's the funny thing, is because I don't listen to any R&B or soul music anymore. And the reason being is that I think if we were to take a knife and slice my wrist, that I would bleed out soul. If I never listen to another soul record again, it's going to bleed out onto the floor. Soul music just going to pour all over your floor. Yeah. So what do? I listen to a lot of other things so that I can pick up other sensibilities of music that I'm not really accustomed to, and so that I grow. And so I don't buy a lot of music and I don't listen to a lot of music, but I do listen to a lot of old music, soul music. I still do. But
I love sharpening that blade.
Yeah, if I don't glean anything from it, if it doesn't enrich me anymore musically, it's, I tend to gravitate for those things that are going to enrich me, and that is going to be another notch or another experience that I can have to build on. Yeah. But I spent many years doing that. So if I never, I've kind of gotten an arsenal of things to build on at this point. But yeah, that's another thing that I'm excited about the album, is because I hope people will listen to it and be able to glean from it musically and offer enough things, portions on the plate, vegetables, meats, starches, breads, all that. I want to give you a whole meal that you can chew on.
Which, just the diversity of the soundscape is something that it's just going to appeal. It's not that homogenized soundscape where somebody that likes that specific sound is just, I want, R&B, I want blues, I want gospel. They're gonna just get that on the album. There's a song that feels like it's for this person, for this person, for this person. Mm-hmm. And just that same way that you're talking about with artists and trying to open their minds, that's going to be something somebody listens to the album and they're like, I'm going to...
Yeah, I don't know if that has anything to do with me born in June, being a Gemini and having, I guess, different personality. But, I think artists evolve over a course of time. Yeah. I evolve over a course of an album. So from song to song, I'm a different person. So
it makes me think of the Life of Pablo experience too. Okay. Just like the back and forth.
What was your experience?
Well, just you look at like Father Stretch My Hands, and it's this very part one. Okay. And you have this kind of like beautiful like Kid Cudi singing like background, and then you look at part two. Okay. And it's much more like harsh and like the music's kind of stripped out of it. Then you go to Famous, and it's this high like sound that's really pretty, and then you go to Feedback and much harsher, and you're getting that kind of Gemini experience there.
Definitely Gemini experience.
The Gemini branding seems to go really like it applies.
Like, Kanye and our birthdays were 8 days apart.
Nice.
He's June 8th, I'm June 16th. So
you got a celebration coming up.
Yeah, it's a lot of bipolar going on here.
Or I'm an Aquarius, so I just think about water all the time.
Okay, I got it.
Oh man, what so you and Kanye had collaborated in the studio music. Was Sunday service a whole different experience for you, just in that way, like? Especially after collaborating for so long together, to finally do something like Sunday service, was that kind of a breath of fresh air? Was that something you had been looking forward to, or now that you've been doing it, something that has felt unique in a way or different in your career?
I spoke. We shared a mutual aunt that. In the early 70s, this is pre-Kanye even, had a choir in Tulsa, Oklahoma called the Ghetto Youth Singers, which was an urban choir in Tulsa, Oklahoma of teenagers that she was the director of. I like to describe it as the 1970s version of Kirk Franklin's God's Property. Okay. We had that in the 70s. Alfre Woodard was in the choir. Charlie Wilson and his brothers from the Gap Band were in the choir. And my cousins and myself were kind of the young token tag-alongs, but we were actually in the choir. But for the most part, they were teenagers. Yeah. I was probably 8, 9, and I was in the choir.
This is early days, people still pointing at you and being like, you're singing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that, even though that was pre-Kanye, it's in his blood. So we've been here before. It's almost like deja vu. It's like almost coming full circle. And even Sunday service for me is because it's so much like our family, and a lot of, I frequently get the question, well, where did you start? Did you start in church? And my response is always, I'm black, aren't I? What black singer didn't start in church? But, coming from a musical family, like I said, my grandmother was the choir secretary. She's actually the church secretary and the choir secretary. She played piano, organ. My aunt and another one of Kanye and I's mutual aunt, they were actually the first black people on local television in Oklahoma City. Wow. And my aunt, the one that directed the choir, was playing piano, and her other sister, our other aunt, was singing as they were maybe 10 and 13. And they were a piano singing duo. Yeah. First black people on local television in the state of Oklahoma. So anytime, any holiday we would get together in our house, in our family, my aunt would get on the piano and be handing out parts. Okay, you're soprano, this is your parts. Tenors, this is your parts, altos, and it was full-on choir, family choir, every holiday. And so basically Sunday service was a personal, intimate inspiration hour and then you have to take into consideration him having the resource. It's no different than what we would be doing as a family anyway. Right. It's just that, okay, I can afford a 65-voice choir, but it's basically just what we've been doing all our life anyway. Yeah. And that's what Sunday service is. Yeah. It's our personal, intimate, what we would have been doing at my grandmother's house.
Is it nice to be able to share that? To not only share that with family, but share it with new family and new friends. And...
Yeah. But production-wise, it's crazy because he's been honing it. He even said, this is my first, back to him chopping up samples. Yeah. There's just another thing. And this is him producing in a live environment, because that Sunday service is actually him producing a choir and a band. Yeah. If you listen to it, those parts we're singing, we don't sing anything that he doesn't hear as sample worthy. Those are the songs, that's what I would sample. Yeah. That's basically what we're doing. We're in the studio, but it's Sunday service.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
What was Coachella like for you? Like did it have some highlights for you?
Yeah, yes. That was surreal. Very interesting. Full circle. There was a band that I had that once again, I mentioned that Kanye was a fan of mine, but pre-college dropout, I had a band based out of Dallas, Fort Worth, where I now reside and have for the last 25 years. But I had a band called Soulja, and it was a CCM band, contemporary Christian, really cool. And the songs that I was crafting with that band, particularly, he became a fan of those songs, and so full circle back to doing Christ-centered songs again. I used to be a Sunday school teacher actually prior to college dropout. Yeah. But yeah, of course, we. So just being able to profess, my relationship with Christ on a public platform is amazing.
Yeah.
First of all, and just always having that background of that church background, choir background, and to just to profess that relationship on a major platform is surreal, and just the connection and how it affected 50,000
There's so many people
from all walks.
Yeah.
From all walks. And so it's just been such a journey, and just people's response, even those attendees at the regular week-to-week Sunday service, and how they leave affected, even if it's just for the upcoming week.
Yeah.
The power that it has to just start your week off just so on a positive note. And people that hadn't had an experience or a conversation with the higher power, God, even in a long time, it's just like that reuniting, because of even myself, I came up, my last experience with a church, physically being in a church, kind of ended with, a church experience that kind of, took me out of the church. I maintained my vertical relationship with my higher power. But, just being able to create a forum where people that, for whatever reason, have not chosen to go to church, but they can still have that experience, is amazing that I could be. And I do consider myself being a vessel.
Yeah.
Definitely. So anytime I can be a vessel, is amazing. He didn't have to choose me. I think anytime somebody can be used in that way, you are fortunate and blessed that he considers me worthy of being a vessel. So yeah, it's amazing experience.
Just to be able to have that connection and do that work on the micro level, like week to week, and then on the macro level of something like Coachella, it just must be very, especially with the reconnection, as you're saying, like very satisfying.
Yeah.
Very refilling in a way.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Nice. I guess for the people already have kind of notions or ideas of the discography of Kanye West and the work that you've done on that discography. Do you have any thoughts about kind of the legacy about the discography and how you would hope people look at the music 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
We're talking Kanye West or Tony Williams?
Kanye West, Tony Williams too, though.
And I think I can answer this question in that it would apply to both of them.
Yeah.
And I kind of alluded to it, but I would want to be remembered as a person that gave people permission to be free, to be liberated, to be themselves. And we kind of talked about this earlier. I come from a time, once again, that line between before internet and after internet, when music was so regional. If you lived on the East Coast, your music was totally different than music on the West Coast. In fact, it was very regional, specific to your exact region. That's what that music sounded like. Yeah. It was very unique. And so because I come from that, I've never stopped being that. I think music now, because the world is so connected by the internet and because information travels so fast, we've become so homogenized and streamlined, and we all sound alike. And I think people lose the ability to tap into what God put in them. Yeah. And I think we miss it. I think we as consumers are being cheated because I think artists have not been able to fail to identify the magic, the creative magic that is within them for trying to become something outside of them to fit something. And so that's what I hope that my musical legacy is that I'm the artist that, I think, especially in this modern era, I want to make that music. And very much with Kanye, especially the early Kanye, was very much like I'm not going to follow the trend. I'm going to set it.
Yeah.
Whether it be in fashion or sonically. You never heard a College Dropout. You never heard this album before. You've never heard this before. And I think when you hear a Tony Williams album, you never quite hear it like this. Even from a writer perspective, I think my job as a writer, because I think, especially with R&B music, I think one of the ingredients of R&B music, by definition, is that we cover like 3 topics. It's like always about a relationship. It's about love.
Yeah.
What else does R&B talk about? R&B music is always hypersexual, if you will. Yeah. It's about at least a relationship.
Yeah.
And that comes from even my experience with even dabbling in other types of music and adapting those sensibilities and especially dealing with that one small area of subject matter. At some point, every story has already been told before.
All right.
And so as a craftsman, it becomes my job to take those same stories but package them in a way that they've never been heard before.
Yeah. Whether that's adding sonics to it, whether it's
or just telling the story.
Yeah.
Because I think I'm a storyteller. I've told this in many interviews, but when I was a young child, my mom I remember she was in college working on her master's, and we used to go to the library every Saturday. And so she could do her research. And I would love going to the library. And I remember on Saturday mornings, there was always a storyteller at the library. And she'd sit in a chair and there'd be kids on the floor all around the storyteller. Yeah. And I was always so intrigued by the craft of the ability to tell a story. Everybody can't tell a story. Mm-hmm. There's that one guy that comes in the barbershop that everybody's just so polarized. Like, this dude and it's mostly lies, but he's so good at telling a story. You didn't care if it was a lie. Like, he could tell it so good.
Yeah.
And those guys were always so compelling to me. And so I like to be able to be that guy that can tell that story in song.
Yeah.
That just commands that you listen to what I have to say, because you've never heard it told that way. So although the topics and the subject matter is very limited because all these stories have been told before, you've never heard it told like the way I'm going to tell it to you.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that I appreciate like so much about what you do with both of these albums is the fact that you're not only telling the story on the track by track, right? Mm-hmm. Like, this song has its story, this song has its story, but the album itself, you're taking it to that next level of this album has a character and this is a story that's being told from the first song to the last.
Correct.
Was that a very important thing for you a choice for you to make? Like, could you have made an album that wasn't doing that?
I'm going to.
Okay.
It's just the art. I think that we're all art. I think a lot of rappers are wannabe singers. Mm-hmm. A lot of athletes are wannabe rappers.
Yeah.
And I just think that the lines blur. I think, and I love comedy.
Yeah.
And so I'm a closet actor, closet comedian. You know,
you do a good job in the videos.
Right? Yeah. And so and I literally, you know, I hope to do movies one day.
Yeah.
That's a desire of mine. I just think that I have the platform creatively. That's the cool thing about even writing songs. It's like a cartoonist. It's an illustrator. Like people that make cartoons, like we could take a bunny or a mouse and we can make him do whatever he wants to, whatever our pencil says he's going to do.
Yeah.
You know, how many times has a roadrunner been killed? You know, how many rocks have dropped on him? We make him do whatever, and then he pops back up. Whatever we draw, that's what happens.
Yeah.
And so that's the fun part of the creativeness for me. It's like whatever we want to do, we do it.
You can tell that story, whether it's a song or it's the album.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, I guess getting to last couple questions. Top 3 albums that you want to talk about? Whether it's any just 3 albums that you meaningful to you, or that you'd recommend people listening to, or are your defined like top 3? I feel like it's probably a defined top 3 may not happen.
Okay, well, what do we have? 3 of different eras of different. Okay.
Yeah.
So, So let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
Influential albums. So when I was about, I must have been 12, I guess. And I'm horrible with timelines, so I could be off 3 or 4 years either way on either side of it. But I remember I had some other cousins a few years older than me that they grew up in El Paso, and I was growing up in Oklahoma City. And they would come down to spend a couple of months out of the summer with my grandparents. And so we would be together, you know, during the summer.
Yeah. And
they were a little older than and I remember my older cousin brought an album that summer. And it was the Parliament Live album.
Ooh.
Yeah, George Clinton, Parliament Live. It had to have been 77, so yeah, that would have made me 12. Just gave my age away. But anyway, and I remember being introduced to that album. And at the end of the summer, when they went back home, went off and forgot the album. And I inherited the album. It became my album.
It's fortuitous.
Very fortuitous, because George Clinton is probably the most influential album. And that goes back to that. It's funny because even being able to answer that question from a creative perspective, because the creativity in the music, you know, he used to even have comic books that came with the album. The whole thing was this whole creative package.
Yeah.
And that was so influential to me, and crafting songs in such a non-traditional way. If you go back and listen to those old P-Funk albums. And so the color in the songs and the album and the construction of the albums is definitely an influence from George Clinton. So that day that I inherited that album, man, was so influential. I'd have to, and it's funny because I hadn't even thought this through like this until you asked me.
Yeah.
But that had to be one of probably the most influential album that I've ever had influence me.
That's awesome.
Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life. Growing up, that was one of my parents' albums. Very interesting. That was an era before we became such a youth-driven era of music, when kids listened to whatever their parents listened to. So I came up on a high diet of Stevie Wonder. You know, I remember Songs in the Key of Life. Big influence musically. I hear it today like I heard it in '74 or whenever it was that it
still
came out.
Hits with that same energy.
Yes, and it still influences me even from a creative when I'm sitting thinking a song formation or a chord progression out. I'm still hearing that like I heard it in '74. You know, so very influential. And probably Gap. You know, Gap used to have their albums as numbers, Gap 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I don't remember which one it was, but it had Early in the Morning, Humpin', Drop the Bomb. That album, yeah. Yeah. So influence-wise, those are probably top 3 influence albums. Let's see. Present day albums, and you know, as soon as this is over, I'm going to come up with I'm going to spit out about 12 more different categories of top 3s. But man, recently, man, ironically, I haven't. But the Wyoming sessions, man, the Nas album, Nasir. Have you heard Bonjour?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Did you hear that?
Absolutely.
I did that.
We did.
I did that.
Funny.
Yeah.
What a coincidence.
Yeah, and I still, man, the Nasir album is, that album. Love the Tiana Taylor album. Yeah, it just so happened I happened to work on that one too. Daytona, did you hear that?
Yeah.
I worked on that one too. Man, those three.
Pusha T guy. Yeah.
Pusha T. I worked on a song on that album called, what was that? Hard Piano, featuring Rick Ross. Did that too. No, but not being a homer, but those, at all. But those albums, like really, like
they were amazing. I think
they were amazing albums.
I think they're albums that, like, because of the showmanship of the release and everything, right? That maybe get overlooked a bit, but as people go back and re-listen over the years, they're gonna keep coming back, being like, oh man, this was better than what I even remember it being, or.
And very, very, and the other perspective, even this specifically the Nas album, and I understand because I guess I would be a pseudo Nas fan, but not like a Nas head.
You didn't have that, like, coming up, you're listening to Nas all through the 90s.
No.
Like,
Yeah. And so when I hear it, and I look at a lot of the purists, the Nas purists, and the critiques of the album, but I'm listening to it from a music purist, and
it's checking all these boxes.
It's checking the boxes.
Yeah, I think that song "Everything" was one of my favorite songs from the entire Wyoming.
Wow!
And one of my favorite from like 2018. It was just like, it's so unexpected.
Yeah.
So unexpected.
Yeah. So and those would be my top 3 current contemporary albums. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah. What about 5 tracks that have kind of been influential or favorite tracks?
Influential 5 tracks. Wow.
Or 3, 5, 1, whatever you want.
Okay. Wow.
There's a lot to pick from.
Yeah, especially going back over my...
Yeah.
Wow.
Any that jump to mind, like, right away, where you're like... just even from the albums you named...
There was some really... Yes. Let's go to Late Registration album. Like, that I think were groundbreaking. Next level game changer. That could... And it's very interesting because I think, like we talked about those album cuts, because I think there's some... That Late Registration felt like that. Yeah. Traditional album. For example, like the song, like Gone. Yeah. That had a Cam and Consequence on it. I think that song was like so before its time. Like, you go back and listen to that Late Registration album and it's like, what is this?
Yeah, it feels built upon, like, College Dropout was like groundbreaking, but it still had a lot of familiarity because it was so based on older sounds.
Yeah.
But there's something about Late Registration that's built on College Dropout and
went into the future.
Yeah. There's cool things going on.
Yeah. You know what? Man, that 5 tracks album, that's because I don't think I'm influenced. I think it's been a long time since a song has been able to influence me like that. You talking about
more the whole.
Yeah. Now, historically, I could go back to the 80s and talk about some of, like, top 5 favorite songs. But, I do that at the expense of really dating myself.
Well, that's okay then. Well, I think that then brings us to your last call, where you have an uninterrupted amount of time to talk about anything that you want to talk about.
Oh, wow.
Whether that's, music, whether that's running, movies, shouting people out, whatever you want to talk about. You get nothing from me.
Okay.
And that's how we'll close out the show.
Okay.
So.
I just saw a movie that, man, you spoke of earlier. You talked about how emotional you get. Man, I'm that guy. Man, I I think I've cried on cartoons before. Like, man, like it doesn't take much for me. Like, I'm such a softie. I saw a movie, and I think it hadn't gotten much attention, but it's actually a documentary I saw. I don't know if you've seen the movie Amazing Grace, the Aretha Franklin documentary. Yeah. I want to shout that out. I made a post about it, but it was so connected to me. It was so amazing, and it potentially could be because it connected me, because it put me back in 1970. I think it was 1973. And I feel like when I got in the theater, I immediately went back to that time, which I think we have certain areas in our life where we are the most impressionable. Excuse me. And it took me back into that time in my life where I was very impressionable, and when things really had an effect. I'm sorry, I'm sitting here. Excuse me. But yeah, so the movie's about Aretha Franklin did the album Amazing Grace, which was a live album. And for whatever reason, they claim that they bring a film crew in, and they intend to release it as a documentary back actually when it was done. And there was technical difficulties, and the movie was pulled and was never released. And the story goes, Spike Lee gets his hands on it and releases it. And so I'm going and I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be a documentary. There's going to be some narrative. They'll show some old clips and boom, boom, boom. No narration. They just basically showed this raw footage of Aretha Franklin in the church with James Cleveland in Los Angeles at the Reverend James Cleveland's church, recording the live album Amazing Grace. And it just took me back to my original childhood choir experiences. And it's the most amazing hour and a half of just the most purest soul singing, that you can ever experience. And man, any fan of gospel music, of just great music and singing, man, just, if you haven't seen it, man, wherever you can find it, I definitely want to shout that music out, that movie out. It's probably the best experience. I really got emotional in the theater, really. And there was only I saw it at a screening, and there was probably all of 30 people in there, and I was sitting up front, and I turned around, and everybody's face in the whole theater, their jaws were just hanging to the floor. It's just a most incredible experience, and just history. So yeah, let's see, what else can we talk about? Wow. We were talking about, and I'm into been doing a lot of traveling lately. Actually, I'm about to go on a trip to Bali in a couple of weeks, but I'm just enjoying traveling, but just love international travel. But you were talking about the Wyoming sessions a while ago, and it just made me think, because it's very interesting, because and I appreciate this aspect of the show, because it allows me to reveal, because I'm like this kind of an outdoor kind of nerd type kind of person, adventurer. And even on tours, it's like I love exploring. When I'm on tour, I get out and get up in the mornings and explore cities just kind of on foot by myself. I've just always been an adventurer. And I think that kind of lends to my ability to be so creative and colorful, and how I see things, as it lends itself to how I even write music, because I've just been an explorer, an adventurer. But man, those Jackson Hole, the Wyoming sessions. Matter of fact, I think I explored Yellowstone National Park 2 days in a row. I kind of played hooky from recording and actually spent the day at Yellowstone. And it's just such a, even when we were at the studio, we took a couple of houses and converted them into studios. We took the beds out of the bedroom and brought in studio equipment. And we would be, literally days, we would be out on the back patio just kind of hanging out, enjoying the mountains and the outside, and a moose would just walk by in front of us. It was just the craziest thing. I even talked about me running through the elk refuge every day for my morning run. But I'm such a nerd for stuff like that. And like, we'd see bears and stuff like that. I don't even know why I brought this up. I'm just kind of I don't know why. I just a spirit of outdoors came over me all of a sudden, and I just kind of tapped into that part of me. But yeah, man, I'm just a person that has chosen or really get a kick out of just enjoying everything that the universe or God has to offer. And so, yeah, it's just about experiences. I've always been a people person. I never have met a stranger. That's the cool thing about even touring, going out, and it's just always about meeting fans. And I'm that guy that would go out, would be at overseas or something, and just like finding, fans and like inviting myself home with them for them to cook me a meal so I can understand how people I want to see the inside. These houses look really different on the outside. Can I see what it looks like on the inside? Like, what do you guys cook? And so it's just I just think life is beautiful. And I've always had a philosophy that being that adventurer or that explorer, that as a single individual, we can only experience, because we only have so many days here on the earth and so many hours in that day. And as a single entity or a single person, we can only experience so much of the universe and so many things in those limited amount of days. But through you and through our conversation and our relationship and me hearing your story and your experiences, I can tap into that part of the universe that I never would have had the opportunity to experience. And so as we walk past people every day that we never even look at them or bother to meet them, we lose out on that experience. And so we shortchange ourselves so many times, and by experiences that we could have had we just connected with each other. So that being said, that's pretty much who the world famous Tony Williams is, and that's now how I got the name, the world famous Tony Williams. But I think that is pretty much as that apropos as as I mentioned, that I just I want to experience. I think that the best experience in the world is experiencing the world, and that includes everybody in it.